What I do is I help emerging and established leaders become better managers. And the reason why that's important is because managers are the lifeblood of your organization. The number one reason people stay in a job is because they're contributing to something meaningful, which is kind of easy for most of you because what you're doing in your startups and the companies that you have developed, the products that you're initiating, those are interesting and they are also about changing the world. So meaningful is what keeps people at work. The number one reason why people leave a job is because of an experience with a bad manager. So what are some of the pain points that managers have? Well, the first one there, it's about balance. So how do you know how much time to spend on your daily tasks or the actual work that you do and that you like to do in the organization? And how much time should you spend managing people, your managerial skills? So if you look at an employee, you may have highly motivated and highly competent, not very motivated, not very competent, right? Or the complicated ones are highly motivated but not very capable, or highly capable and not very motivated. And the reason why those are complex are because when someone's highly motivated, we may mistake them for also being capable or well-trained on whatever task it is that we want them to do. The other one is complicated because if you have someone highly capable in your organization or team, you want to keep them. So if they're not motivated, what do you do to make sure that they get enthusiastic and excited about being at work? Okay, avoiding hard feedback. I don't know about you, but I don't love giving hard feedback or critical feedback to other people. It's a hard thing to do for most of us. So you'll learn that. Knowing how to inspire, that's another piece in terms of pain. Feeling overly responsible, another word for that might be micromanaging. If you get too involved in people's tasks and try to help them do it once you've delegated it to them. So how do I roll back off of that? How do I let them fail, potentially? And then being unavailable. So if you travel a lot, if you're out with customers and your staff is there and they're kind of sitting around going, well, I kind of need some guidance, but I don't know how to reach him or her, right? And then building and sustaining trust. So it's really easy, of course, to break trust, not as easy to build it, especially once it's been broken. So I share these with you because these are some of the key aspects to what's difficult about management and that these can all be changed. You can transform every single one of these through any kind of management development program that you decide on for your teams. So the secret to growth in your organization are great managers. So what's the timeline for development? When should you be thinking about management development? Many of you are probably in startup mode. This is not necessarily the time with 5, 10, even 50 employees to really get too concerned about management development. This is the time for leadership support, right? Coaching, mentoring, maybe business consultants. You may want to certainly be thinking about values and culture. So what kind of company culture do you want? Once you get into hypergrowth, and that's when you're hiring a lot more people, those folks in your organization, they're the ones who are going to be needing to understand how to be managed well and then also be reliant on some kind of skill to manage their teams, make sure they're up and running successfully. So the foundation to any kind of management program, because I can imagine some of you, particularly if you're in startup phase, you're saying, well, how do I even begin to think about this once I start hiring people? Well, the foundation of any kind of company that you're going to be successful in terms of a leadership culture is developing that culture. And in order to develop that company culture, you're going to want to have some values. Choose 2 values that you want your company to be known for. They might be aspirational, they might be already existing. Now, the important thing about values, and some of you who have worked for big corporations and you've had company values before, and they're on a nice plaque on the wall or they're on a screensaver, right? Or they might be, in some document somewhere. That's great, and I'm glad that that exists. But the key is, how do you operationalize these? How do you live and breathe values? And so I want you to also work on that, but you'll do this alone, just on a piece of paper, whatever device you can write on. And I want you to think about how might I take one of those values I just came up with and actually make it livable, right? So if you were going to tell a manager, this is how you walk the talk, or walk the walk, whichever way you say it, in our organization, this is how you execute on this value, right? So for example, I took the one transparency, and I said a manager in every team meeting will put on the agenda a few minutes about what is the company doing overall, what's happening at the company, so that employees and team members know what's the state of the company at the moment. Now, this seems like kind of a simple exercise, but what's really important about this is it will dramatically influence your hiring practices. So if you do this well, and it becomes part of your recruiting and hiring process, then what happens is people who join your organization will say, I'm really impressed with this company, I really want to be here, because they live and breathe these values. And they shared those with me, and I really saw them in play in our interaction. And that can be hugely meaningful when you're working at an organization, right? When you actually see that they walk the talk. So a manager's role is managing self, managing others, and managing team. It's about finding that balance we talked about. Time management's important. What are my preferences? How do I make those preferences obvious to others so that I set those expectations in terms of the way we're going to communicate? Then managing others is about giving important feedback, coaching, career development, performance conversations. And managing team is how do I get a team up and running successfully together, and do that when they're dispersed, do that when they might be global. But in the book, I asked lots of managers from all over the world who have managed in many different contexts, and they basically said at least 50% of your time should be people management. It should be career development, it should be coaching, it should be team motivation. They also said, again, it's not an absolute science, it's also an art. So it could be that it's 80-20 sometimes, 70-30 sometimes, right, depending on the project or the situation. But at least 50% should be people management. And that can be a little daunting because some of you or some of the people that you're working with, they've been hired into your organization because they're experts in what they do and they're excited about what they do. So especially in tech companies, when you have developers and engineers, that's where they have their whole identity is in working on those tasks. So they like to spend all their time tinkering. So then in order to make their career path in the same organization, what's the next opportunity for them? Well, to become a manager of those experts. And so all of a sudden they're hired into or thrown into or promoted into a management position, and it's like, oh gosh, now I have to manage people, and I may not know how to do that very well, or it just might not be my thing. So it's interesting because when we worked with SpaceX, they said, you know, we're really going to have this issue with new managers. And I said, well, why don't we do something like aspiring to management, and we'll do a program around that so that people could come in and they could find out what does it truly mean to be a manager. And then once they understand, they can decide, oh, that's really not for me, or they can go, I think I can do that, right? With a little training, a little help, a little support, I see how it makes sense. And I also see how I can prioritize and not give up all the tinkering, right, to your point, where you can still be doing the fun stuff that you want to work on, and then you can delegate the stuff you don't really want to work on, right? Which to someone else is empowering and exciting because it's new for them. I want to also talk about time management. I love this particular matrix. Most of you have probably seen it. It's Stephen Covey's model that he uses in his book, right? 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a classic, and I think it's absolutely excellent. And he really talks about 2 areas, really urgency and importance, right? And so if you could think about what goes into urgent and important in terms of your daily tasks at work. Something's broken, site's down, products, troubles, right? Some customer requests might go in there. If you have a boss or a manager or stakeholders and they're asking you a question, that might go in there. So not urgent, but important. That's typically around being proactive and planning. And then not urgent, not important. So Facebook, shopping online when you're at work, things like that. Urgent and not important. That's kind of a tricky one. What's urgent but not important maybe to you? So the punchline of this time management model is that the more that you have in not urgent but important, the more highly effective you are. So I'm showing that to you because that's a typical example of what would be in a manager program. That was a mini version. We do kind of an extended version. But just so you get an idea of how that could be useful potentially to a manager, just thinking about, wow, I'm so overwhelmed, I have all these responsibilities. What do I need to prioritize? And how do I delegate? What do I need to get rid of? And so when they go through this process, they can really see the shifts. So again, that's the secret. If you have great managers, they will help you grow your organization, right? They will motivate and empower the people that work for them. And overall, they will uphold your company culture and values. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you very much. As long as you have really great facilitators, you could do away with some of that hierarchy, right? So maybe you nominate facilitators of that team as opposed to a manager, per se, of that team. But to your point about the CEO, I mean, I think if the cultural environment works, so I mean, we also have to consider that there are some cultures that are very hierarchical, and it actually makes them uncomfortable to be sitting with their CEO right in the middle of the room. So if you're thinking about global expansion, of course, that would be a consideration, right? But I think if it works for the company environment and that particular culture, why not? At least you could try it as an experiment. So I don't think, so my ultimate opinion is I think it could work. Why not? You can be great at listening, which I personally would call coaching, which means you ask more questions of your people, which creates a lot of empowerment and a lot of ownership on the individual, and do less telling, right, and directing. That tends to be, that's what I see as being really successful. And most companies are implementing serious coaching programs for managers and leaders because of that. That's really effective. And also because we talk about generationally as the workforce is changing, people want to be heard more. They want to be able to say their opinion, their ideas. I mean, when I talked about my stepson, he loved the idea of emailing the CEO and telling him what he thinks. I think that's our immediate present and future. And so if the CEO hopefully is a good listener, he or she's doing a good job with that. All right, so the one tip about keeping good people and working with people who are difficult, right? Or maybe underperforming. This was like some of the best advice that I had ever heard from a C-level exec in Silicon Valley. And basically she said, people who have a behavior issue that you want to correct or change, that's something that should change immediately. Meaning, let's say someone's talking too much in a meeting, or they're always late, or they're doing something weird with customers. You give them feedback and say, you got to change this behavior. If you do it well, and they're clear and they understand what it is that needs to change, that should change within a week or two, right? Maybe there's one reminder, maybe two, but that should change immediately. It should not be 9 months. So that's another point, is that your high performers, yes, they're good. Yes, they can be autonomous. Yes, they can be left alone. Yes, they'll excel, but they still need your attention as a manager or leader. They want to be challenged. They want to be appreciated. So you want to still keep in touch with them.